Hey, you. Yes, you. Can you mind if we talk for a second? No, seriously. I wish I was joking, but can we really talk? And no, I don't mean just like the service level of I'm good conversations, like, oh, I'm all right. Not the we laugh but never really go deep conversations. Not the oh, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, so I'll silence myself type of conversations. I mean, the conversations that challenge, challenge a thought, a belief, a pattern, a cycle, friendships, challenge the construct that really heals you. Those type of conversations. Do you mind if we have those? Could we talk about that? The type of conversations that sometimes break you open, that opens up a door that we wasn't really looking for, but we know that will get down to the root of things. Because the truth is, throughout every day, we meet dozens of people and we surround ourselves with nothing but people. But we're still alone in those spaces that we enter in every single day. So today, we're asking the real questions. Not only just could we talk? No, that's just opening the door. But really, are you in a healthy space or just a familiar one? That's what we'll be talking about in today's episode of Outreach with Reggie. So stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Outreach with Reggie. I'm your host, Reginald Holloway, and I know it's been a while. It's been quite some time since I recorded my last episode that covered not only me navigating foster care, but the story of my mother and my last few moments with her as she passed away on Mother's Day a few years ago. But nevertheless, I'm back. And after navigating life over these past couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to come back to this space. And I want to say thank you for those who are joining in for the first time and also coming back. So, with that being said, I've had the opportunity to analyze. I'm in a new season, of course, navigating a few things right now, which is more than okay. But within the navigation, I've been able to understand within every piece of community that I'm a part of, what I'll be talking about today. Healthy community. Am I in a healthy space, or am I just mixing what's healthy with what is familiar? And that's important. It's a balance. And it's a difference. Because everywhere that I go, or everywhere that I've gone, whether it's work, school, friendships, relationships, no matter what you decide to label it as, within these spaces, I keep saying the same thing. Some through my own experience, and other times through the lens of others. And that is people are talking, people are communicating, right? People are sharing their story, but they are not being heard, which is interesting enough. Oxymoronic, if you will, but within that, people are present, they're here, they're showing up, but they're not necessarily included. People are connected to things, beautiful things, but they're not safe. They don't feel safe to the things that they're connected to. And as you're listening to this right now, if you feel like, Reggie, what are you talking about? You're speaking nonsense. Don't worry. This may not be for you, but for those who show up and present themselves and show up and fight these silent battles when the lights are off and they go home and they sit alone. And as they analyze where they are in community, in the spaces that they participate in, and question it, and it breaks them, this episode is for them. And if that sounds like you, I thank you for being here in this space. And in that, we'll be unpacking what does it actually mean to create healthy spaces and conversations. And as we do that, I want to pose a question. When was the last time you were in a space, that being a conversation, a room, a relationship, where you actually felt free? And no, I don't mean performative. I don't mean managing your emotions or just condensing it just to navigate the spaces that you have to, right? Not filtering yourself, your language, your expression, who you are, down to what is acceptable. I mean free. When was the last time you felt free? And I'll wait. And if you had to really think about that and nothing came to mind immediately, then today's episode was made for you. Because we are talking about spaces, all of them, the healthy ones, the toxic ones, the performative ones. We're talking about conversations that heal and conversations that harm. We're analyzing when we talk about what it really means to show up for others, and most importantly, yourself. I remember talking to a dear friend of mine and telling them, like, I haven't really looked in the mirror. Haven't at that time because of what space I was in. I couldn't bother to look at myself in the mirror from a physical nor a mental space. But that's important how we show up. So before I go into that, we're going to go into the segment one, the first segment, and that is, what is a healthy space? Because before we can even talk about building something, building a healthy space, analyzing it, we must define what it is truly. And we need to be honest about what we're even building towards in doing so. And what instantly comes to mind is, of course, the age-old expression, right? Or the social media trend of we listen and we don't judge. Often associated with it being or creating a safe space in that, right? A safe space from judgment. And people throw around that term, that phrase, safe space, all the time. You've heard it in schools along with your counselor, in therapy offices, in HR trainings. But I want to ask, do we know what it actually means? Or do we associate it with just not judging, the space where I'm not yelled at, a space where I can, I'm free from harm? But what if harm isn't just the one? What if harm isn't linear? Well, as we analyze what a healthy space is, we know the characteristics of it, or we can break it down a bit. Because it's deeper than somebody yelling at you. That doesn't make it a healthy space. A healthy space is where your presence is valued and not just tolerated. You're celebrated and not just tolerated. Not just because of familiarity that you just become a tag along and they just treat you as such and just associate you or pull you in because they feel sympathy. A healthy space is where a healthy space is where your truth can exist without it being weaponized against you later. You can be helped. You can ask for help and be in a space for help without it being used against you, weaponized, manipulated. It's where growth is expected from everyone in it, not just you. And a healthy space is where accountability is present without cruelty attached to it, right? We can take accountability for what our actions is without feeling like there's need to pass the blame, or even analyzing the term of constructive criticism. I remember that being such a common thing growing up. It's like, oh, I'm just giving you some tough love or constructive criticism, and even analyzing that those who was giving it out often felt like they were excluded from it, or even worse, they feel like they done right by you because they give you some tough love. And not to say that tough love is a bad thing or even constructive criticism, but when done right, it can be a beautiful thing. But oftentimes it's used as a vehicle to say some pretty nasty stuff or say some things that you really been holding on to for a very long time. But we'll get to that soon. To keep us back on track, I want to take a closer look at a thing that I think that gets missed often. In that a space isn't always physical, right? We all enter different spaces throughout our day-to-day life, right? You go to work, you go to school, you interact with thousands of people every single day. If you take the bus, the train, you're driving, you're ordering something from your favorite fast food place or restaurant, you have coworkers, for those who have children and family. No matter what it looks like, you're interacting every day. You're entering into different physical spaces every single day, and that's fine. But a space isn't always physical. Sometimes a space is a text thread. Sometimes a space is a dinner table. And sometimes a space is a phone call that you either look forward to or you dread. And even, as we are still in foster care month or at the end of foster care awareness month, several of my fellow foster care alumni know what I mean by this. As you're moving from place to place, sometimes a space can be very unstable. And within the instability, it can feel very crippling. But ask yourself, where are your spaces? Right now, I want you to think about 5 places or relationships where you spend a significant amount of your emotional energy. And then rank them. Which ones fill you up? Which ones make you feel like home? That boost you up, that fuel your dreams, goals, ambitions, that fuel you, that shape who you are, that pour into you. And then analyze which ones that drain you, which ones that you feel less of yourself in and more of a stranger, not only to them, but to yourself. Because that's important. As you are attempting to navigate all of these places, you must analyze which ones that take and which ones that give before you even walk in them. Because where we spend our time and energy is not neutral. Spaces do, in a way, shape us. And I want to talk about that. A healthy space is not just a place where nothing bad happens. A healthy space is where truth can exist without punishment, right? It's where we can allow truth to be said and truth to be present without it feeling like judgment or crippling pain or the seed of trauma. It's where vulnerability is not weaponized, where accountability exists without humiliation, right? Because let's be completely honest here. Some of us confuse comfort with healthiness, with health. It feels good here, so it must be healthy. And while that may be true, it could also breed things like stagnation, and it can potentially be breeding ground for other things like manipulation and elsewhere. And I'm not saying these things to ever scare you or confuse you in a way, but it's to say that just because it's familiar does not mean that it's completely safe. You can grow up in a household. You could be in a friend group, sit in a classroom, and still feel like you have to shrink yourself to survive in it. A lot of times, and I remember growing up, and not only just through navigating foster care, but just navigating just usual friendships where I had goals and dreams and aspirations. And many of those who are listening right now can relate to this, where you share your dreams of what you want to do in life. And you have friends, good friends, and you bestow to them and say, hey, man, I want to go to college. And for some who have great friends, and they'll say, hey, if you want to go to college, I know you can go to college because I know you're smart, you're intelligent, and you're a workhorse. I know you can do it. And to some, that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. But you have those who have navigate friends and families and friend groups or even households altogether that may not even experience the opportunity to have a dream, to have goals or ambitions that may say, college? Man, you can't go to college. Look what you do. You goof around all day. College? What do you mean college? Man, you're going to be here with me. You can't afford college. Look at you. How you going to go to college when you don't have anything? How you going to go to college when, you know, insert insult? And if you're not a strong-willed individual or you've already been riddled with disappointment, it can slowly plant a seed in your mind of doubt. Maybe I can't do these things. And you feel like you have to shrink your ambitions, your goals, your dreams. Or even you shrink yourself to maintain the relationships that you have. Even if it's not good, you've known this person, you've known this group, you've known these individuals for quite some time. So you don't want to lose connections. You don't want to lose family because you want to improve your life. You don't want to lose friends because you want to move to a new city, a new place, a new residence. You don't want to lose these things, but in the process of losing these things, if you shrink yourself, you lose the very person that you owe it to, which is yourself. So you must ask the person in the mirror that, can I be honest here without the fear of losing this connection I have with the people who I'm familiar with? If the answer leads itself to be no, then you might not be in a healthy space. And if the answer is yes, I commend you for being in those spaces. And I pray that the abundance of those spaces continue to grow. But as we analyze that, we must analyze relationships, friendships, and familiars within this next segment. So here we are. Let's talk about relationships. Because everyone says That's my friend. Cuzzo, that's my dog. Road dog. That's family to me because of familiarity. But what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean to say that's my friend? Is friend something, words to you? Was friend, was that foundational? Because we use hundreds, thousands, millions of words all the time. But the significance of those words, the weight of those words, how much do they weigh to you, to your friends, or to your relationships? Because there's levels to friendship. There's levels to who we interact with, right? Acquaintances, excuse me, there's acquaintances, there's familiar faces, there's friends, and then there's safe people. And we blur those lines all the time. All the time. Right? We often treat an acquaintance, well, we treat safe people like friends. We treat familiar faces like acquaintances. And because we see someone all the time, we think they're acquaintances. But as we blur those lines, we must know that there are levels. Right? You're not going to share your deepest secret with an acquaintance. You're never going to invite someone from work to some place that's a beautiful personal space unless they become your friend. And that's a beautiful thing too. And that's possible. But there's levels to friendship. Some people are not your friends. Let me say that again. Some people are not your friends. They're just people you've had proximity with. Proximity as in you may grown up with them. They may lived across the street. You've been going to the same place with them for years. You grew up with them. You went to college with them. You went to high school with them, right? And we often associate that with, hey, they're my friend. But what if it's just proximity? Maybe if they are your friend, it's beautiful. But are they your friend? Or are they just a familiar face? And how we analyze that is a real friend, as we use the word friend, a real friend has the opportunity to tell you the truth when they see you go off course. Even when things in conversations get uncomfortable, where you allow to talk beyond the point of seeing who's going to win between the Spurs and the Thunder, or who's getting drafted, or what's going on in the news, right? They tell you the truth. A real friend holds space for you to grow, challenges you to grow when they see like things are going stagnant. And they're not competing with you. A real friend doesn't compete with you, and they don't compete with your healing. But here's the flip side to that. Are you a person? Are you that person that you're looking for others? As you are analyzing what it means, what friendship means, what the relationships that you have, the people that you're associating with or even talking to or interacting with every single day, the spaces that you're entering in, right? As you're looking for a safe space, can these same people find that in you? Are you someone who can be honest with someone, who can hold space for someone to be vulnerable with? Do you find yourself opening a space to where people can call you and tell you how it is without you looking for it to be transactional? Because healthy spaces don't just happen they're created by how you show up too. Here's something I think about a lot, and that is we don't come into this world knowing how to talk to each other. We learn it. We learn it from our families. As I talk about so often, the institution of family is our first classroom. It's where we gain the lessons and learn the lessons in the curriculum of engaging with one another. And then it sprinkles out to what interactions we see within our neighborhoods. Are we greeting our neighbor like Mr. Rogers, or are we throwing the middle finger up and cussing each other out? And then it goes into school hallways. And for those like me who grew up in foster care, does it look like that in group homes and in foster home placements? From coaches and teachers and people who either made us feel heard or didn't. These lessons these are the lessons that we learn. And a lot of us, and this may be challenging to hear, learned wrong. The curriculum that we've learned from mom, dad, sister, brother, foster parent, group home official, staff, or insert grown adult in your life that you have high admiration for, there is a possibility that the curriculum was wrong. And that's okay because it may have been a result of what was there or what was socially acceptable or how they navigated. But it doesn't mean that it was right. And it's not because the people who taught us were bad either, but more so because they learned wrong too. And nobody stopped the cycle or even challenged the cycle to begin with. But as I said before, we could talk about a few places that shaped how we communicate, the relationships and family dynamics. In a lot of families, especially black and brown households, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, emotions aren't always welcomed at the table. You learn this early. Be strong, don't cry, handle it. In foster care, you learn something even harder. Don't get too comfortable, right? I myself transitioned to 30 plus foster care placements, both within foster cares and group homes. And especially being in foster care, entering in the early 2000s and leaving, I want to say, before the 2020s, I've seen how there's been a shift within the dynamic, but during my time growing up in foster care, I would say there was an increased amount of instability. And even more so, how we were able to talk about emotions wasn't always available. And even so much so, there's other things like not to trust too fast because it will be used against you. And don't need too much. Don't need too much. It's too problematic. Those survival strategies made sense for the moment as you were attempting to navigate these spaces. But what happens when you carry them into adulthood? Where you're no longer that kid who's not trying to be too problematic, that shrinks themselves. Now you're an adult, and now you're entering into friendships, into romantic relationships, but you're still bracing for impact in a room that actually is safe. Another space I want to talk about is the institution of education, where school is supposed to be a place for growth intellectually, socially, and emotionally. But for a lot of young people, especially youth of color, youth in poverty, youth in the system, school is just another place where you learn your lane and stay in it. You learn whose voices gets amplified based on the knowledge and the skills and the attributes of those who you're going to school with. You learn those story. You learn whose story gets told in textbooks, in the curriculum, and whose doesn't. You learn sometimes very quickly that inclusion is sometimes performative, which brings me to something I want to address head on, which is the cultural and societal expectations regarding race, class, and gender. And no, this is not another sociology class, but if you choose to take it as such, then by all means. But there are conversations that are considered normal in some communities and completely taboo in others. And it often breaks down by race, class, and gender. Talking about mental health in certain spaces gets you called weak. Asking for help in certain communities gets you called a burden. Crying in some places, depending on who you are, gets you called soft. These aren't just social norms, these are barriers to healing. And they are costing us. Because there is a cost, especially to our young people, enormously. Because the more we don't get a chance to have these conversations, the more the elephant grows within the room. But as we talk about that, within the next segment, we're going to talk about what it means to be performative. Performative connection and passive engagement. Because there's something happens, a push-pull method. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about performative relationships. And you know what performative looks like. You know what it looks like within relationships. Checking in, but not really listening. Saying, hey, how are you? But not really caring how they are. You just want to say, hey, how are you? Because that's a greeting. A formal greeting. Hey, how are you? How you doing? Saying, oh, I got you. But when someone needs you, you don't actually have anything for them. Being present physically, but emotionally, you're very unavailable. Or better yet, you see this oftentimes enough when there's grief, when there's a passing, when someone has lost someone. And you say, hey, if you need anything, man, anything at all, I got you. But then a 2 a.m. call happens, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. And the very statement that you said is now being challenged, along with your capacity to live up to that. And a lot of us fall or don't measure to that statement that we say. And that, my friend, is passive engagement. And the problem with that is we've normalized it. We've normalized being halfway there, giving just enough. Just enough. Just enough to satisfy the relationships that we have. But here's the thing about healthy spaces. Healthy spaces require participation, active listening, active hearing, active engaging, active talking, not just showing up, but being engaged. Not just hearing someone talk, but understanding what's being said, not just existing, but contributing to the environment that you're in. And to really get down to the meat and potatoes, I need to go here because I think this is the heart of the episode. Mental health conversations, as it is teetering the end of mental health awareness month. real ones, are still rare in a lot of communities. And I want to be specific. There's a rarity when we factor in race, class, and gender regarding mental health conversations. Studies and surveys consistently show that mental health conversations are happening more, but not equally. When researchers look at where and how often people actually talk to friends or family about their mental health, the gaps are significant. Who can you go to say that I'm having a bad day? What do you do? And I call this the 3 seconds. How do you bring attention to the silent part, right? Because I can go into the numbers all day, but there's a ton of people, and researchers say how many times we can talk about mental health, right? I want to just talk like a human to you and ask you, you know, to the people that feel the most isolated, there's a big gap. Those who are youth of color, low income individuals, men. Of course, researchers say they're least likely to have those conversations in their personal circles. But from me to you, how often do you talk about where you are mentally? How are you mentally? Right? We're not for those who are navigating life, for those who are navigating the job market in 2026. How is your mental health? For those who didn't get a chance to live up to everything that they wrote in that 10-year high school reunions coming up, how's your mental health? For those who had goals, dreams, ambitions, those who've thought you was going to marry that person, thought you was going to be in that relationship forever, thought you was going to be in that marriage forever. If you're in a marriage attempting to navigate infidelity, attempting to navigate not being where you want to be because you have responsibilities that does not completely coincide with where you want to be. No matter what the struggle is, how are you doing mentally? And are you talking to people, or can you talk to people about it and be honest about it? That's not a coincidence that it's not a coincidence that there's a gap, that not too many people are talking about where they are mentally. It is a result of decades of people, or of us normalizing that you should handle it alone, that it makes you tough. But here's what I find interesting in that: the conversations are happening, they're just happening in fragments. People will post something vague on social media, they'll drop a hint in passing, they'll laugh about it like it's some dark, like it's something dark about it, like a dark joke. That's not open. That's not being open. That's a sign. It's just like the expression, if I ever get rich, I won't tell anybody, but there'll be signs. Well, think about it in the sense of where you are mentally. I won't tell anybody that I'm in a very low, dark place, but there'll be signs. And I think we have to ask, why are we still signaling instead of speaking? Or how do you even look for the signs? Part of it is trust. We'll get there. I don't know how, but we'll get there. Part of it is very much strategic sharing, knowing what to say, to whom, and when. And that's real. There's wisdom in not putting your full self in front of everybody. But there's a difference between strategy and silence, too. There's one that protects you, and another one that slowly isolates you. And the further you go in isolation, the more intense it feels from a mental health standpoint of navigating it on your own. And part of it, a big part, is pride. Sorry if that's a cuss word, but I'm going to cuss anyway. Pride. Pride to feel like you have to do it alone. You must do it alone. Ain't nobody else can do it for me but me. I got me. There's this idea in a lot of communities that ask for help, that asking for help is a weakness, that needing something, someone, emotionally, mentally, is treated as a failure. And I want to challenge that directly. Asking for help is one of the most courageous things you can ever do. It's not a character flaw, not in the slightest. But who could you, yes, you, who could you ask for help? Truly. And who could you have the conversation with honestly about where you are mentally without being pride? Before we get into this next segment, I remember Dave Chappelle, he said, sometimes you have to be a lion to really be the lamb that you really are. And as I think about that, if you're listening to this right now and you're in a very bad mental space, it doesn't have to be in front of everybody. Maybe just find one person, one space. And if you don't have anybody, I challenge you to go into the mirror and look at yourself and really pour in and just let go and really express, write it down, pray to God and just be honest about where you are right now and say that I don't have it. And don't be afraid. Put that pride aside, push it aside and really be honest about where you are. And would it change everything? Absolutely not. Not in one night, but it's a start. But don't let pride be the reason why you don't get the help that you deserve. But within saying that, we're going to move into this next segment 4, which is culture, society, silent conversations. So let's go deeper. Because as we talk about pride, as we talk about spaces, as we talk about what's expected and what's oftentimes becomes passive, we have to understand not all conversations are easy to have. Mental health is not an easy conversation to have, and it often is one of the biggest things that challenges our capacity to be there for not only others but ourselves. In some communities, mental health is completely ignored, but often is the gateway to addictions. It's the gateway to actions, and some actions we cannot come back from. In some communities, vulnerability is seen as a weakness, and asking for help is seen as a failure. So people suffer silently. Research consistently shows that many people, especially in marginalized communities, are more likely to talk to friends or family about mental health than to seek professional help. But what happens when those spaces aren't equipped to hold that weight? Now you're carrying trauma in a space that can't support healing. So who do you go to when you're carrying so much trauma with no one that has the capacity to be there for you? That's a dangerous place to be in. And isolation only makes it more hazardous. But let me shift us and get a little bit more personal here and ask, how many of y'all have friends that you don't actually know? Like, you've known each other for years. You might even call each other best friends. Man, that's my dog. That's my friend. I know he got my back like four flats. Or some old expression like that. But if someone put you on the spot and asked, what is this person's greatest fear? What are they working through right now? What do they need the most right now? You'd have nothing. That's not a friendship, that's familiarity. And I'm not saying being familiar with somebody is bad. Some relationships are meant to be surface level. They're meant to be right there. Right there. Okay, hi. Hi, bye. See you later. Hey, how are you? Doing all right? All right, see you later. Bye-bye. Not every person in your life needs your whole story. But I think a lot of us are calling familiar friendships and relationships friends, and then get confused and hurt when they don't hold us the way friends are supposed to. Let me give you a framework to think of in relationships regarding the levels of it. Level 1, acquaintances. You know each other. You're cordial. That's it. That's okay. Level 2, you're familiar. You got history, inside jokes that maybe no one else gets. And that's okay. Maybe you've seen each other through some things, but the relationship is largely surface level. There's no real depth of honesty there. It's not even a space to be honest. Because what does it mean to you to be honest with this person? Familiar. And then we go to level 3, which is friend. This is where trust lives, where honesty lives. You can be honest. You can be vulnerable. There's a space to be reciprocal. Reciprocity, meaning both people show up for each other. You're there for each other. Friend. And then the final level, confidant. This is a rarity now, finding a confidant. This person knows you. There's intimacy here. They know everything about you, not just who you present to the world, but who you are when the lights are off and no one's just watching. It's not just about you, they know you. They don't know just about you, they know you. They can tell when something's off, when you're faking it. But you can't fake it to them. You can't lie to them. And they tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. This is your inner circle. But here's the problem. As I said before, a lot of us have a lot of people in level 4 that honestly are in level 1. A lot of people that we're even expecting level 4 behavior from level 2 people, and then feel abandoned when they cannot deliver. Even going into performative relationships, I want to name this because this is real. Some people are in your life not because they care about you, but because what being close to you looks like in benefits. The benefit of being close to you: social capital, clout, access. But that's not friendship. That's transactional. And soon, the sooner you can name it, the less power it has over you. Which goes into my next point, which is limited honesty and transparency. And there's another layer to that. Some people are in your life, some people in your life care about you tremendously. They genuinely do, but they can't be honest with you. Maybe because they're afraid of conflict. Maybe because they want to protect your feelings. Maybe because they have their own stuff they're not dealing with either. Honesty without cruelty is care. The absence of honesty, even when it comes from a kind place, can keep you in a place of stagnation. Which brings me to a phrase I want to unpack that I mentioned before, which is tough love. We've all heard it. Some of us grew up with it. But let me be real. Tough love is often used to justify harsh, emotionally unavailable behavior under the covering of care. Real tough love, or as I said before in another phrase, constructive criticism, challenges you while still holding you. It is not criticism with no exit ramp. It's not, I'm telling you this for your own good, used as a weapon. Because there's a difference between constructive criticism, which builds, and harmful criticism, which tears down and is a weapon for destruction. Destruction of dreams, hopes, goals, ambitions, and growth, and most importantly, healing. But as we move forward into this next segment here, I want to cover honesty, criticism, and tough love. To piggyback off what we talked about in segment 4, constructive criticism and harmful criticism, there's a big difference. And it's very important when we decide to use constructive criticism versus and how we use it. Because it's a vehicle for sure. But how we choose to steer it shapes the outcome forever. It's not something that you can just passively do. It's something that it's a lingering effect. It's like it's a seed. You can choose how you water it. But constructive criticism comes with care. It has the intention to build and is delivered with respect. And even that is vague because what is respect? Because you can respectfully disrespect someone. And you don't really have the control over, over where words may lie. Your intention may be good, but the language that you use, the intention can affect the impact. Which leads me into harmful criticism versus constructive, which harmful criticism attacks identity, shames instead of corrects, and leaves damage, not direction. And then there's tough love. And let's be honest, a lot of what people call tough love is just unhealed behavior with a label on it. Tough love without compassion is just harm. And I want to get real with you. When we talk about what other people owe us in a space, what other people bring on, what other people bring or don't bring, we analyze it all the time. But what I think one of the most courageous questions you can ask yourself is, how am I showing up? It's very much the reflection of it all, right? We can analyze what spaces, what relationships, what friendships, but the hardest things and the most courageous things is how we analyze ourselves. So as I give you throughout this episode, I want you to also look at you. Get real familiar with you. Not how you want to show up, not how you show up on your best days, but how are you actually showing up? How are you actually showing up? In your relationships, in your conversations, in the spaces you move through every single day, are you present? Are you performing presence? Which leads me into my point within this segment: participation versus passive engagement. There's a difference between being in the room and being in the conversation. A lot of us have mastered the art of passive engagement, nodding, reacting, saying the right things without actually being vulnerable or accountable. That's dangerous. But real participation means bringing yourself, your actual perspective, your discomfort sometimes, your honest reaction, not your curated one. If you don't actually like what's being said, if you don't actually like what's the feeling of the room, versus trying to navigate and being passive and saying, man, I really love what we're talking about here and what we're doing here. In the same breath, if your honest reaction is, man, I feel like we're not challenging the room to say, I'm not liking what we're saying, doing, or participating in right now. And maybe we need to change the direction of what we're going towards. Which leads me to my next point: inclusion. Because sometimes some of us feel too honest and say, well, if I give my actual opinion on it or my actual perspective, I'm going to make a lot of people upset. Yes, I see that all the time. And inclusion isn't just about inviting somebody to the table just because they agree about what we say, what we do, our beliefs, our way of life. Inclusion is making sure their voice matters at the table. You can invite someone and still ignore them. You can check a box and still make someone feel invisible, right? Because of familiarity, being familiar with somebody, you've known them for years, you can include somebody, you can invite somebody in to wherever you are and still make them feel unseen. It asked, real inclusion asked, who's here? Who's missing? Whose needs are we centering and whose are we constantly deprioritizing? But sometimes as we aim to do right, and we even look at dissect inclusion, sometimes we navigate and look at these relationships, and sometimes we tend to analyze and try to look at the expectations that we put on each other. That being on friendships, relationships, family members, or even spaces that we interact with every day. One of the heaviest weights in any relationship is the unspoken expectation. Things that you expect someone to do and are silently let down that they didn't do it because it hasn't been vocalized or agreed upon. Sometimes we feel like we don't have to. It should just happen, or they should just know. We expect people we love to know what we need emotionally, mentally, without saying it out loud. And then we feel hurt when they miss the mark. Part of creating healthy spaces is to learn to speak your need, even when it feels like it's so simple. They should know it already, even when it feels vulnerable, even when it means admitting that you have needs. They should know about how I feel, how I look, how I'm silent, how my eyes look, my body language, the non-body languages, the non-verbal, the verbal. They should know. But we must remind each other that we are human and we're not going to get it right. There's not a human being that has attended school that has got 100 and 100 on every single assignment that they've ever taken from pre-K to the last assignment in the 12th grade, or even towards the end of college, or their master's or PhD, whatever. You're not going to hit it 100 times. You're not going to hit it 100% all of the time, because you're human. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But like I said before, part of creating healthy space is to learn to speak your need, to speak your uncomfortability, to speak your invisibility when you feel unseen, unheard. It's okay to say when things aren't okay. But here's where we go into the next segment. Short segment, but I want to say this because I feel like it's needed. Strategic sharing and safe vulnerability. Everybody does not deserve access to your story. And quite frankly, everybody does not deserve your full story. Let me say that one more time. Everybody does not deserve to have access to you, nor your full story. But that's where strategic sharing comes in. As we analyze over and over the levels of friendship and analyzing it, we must realize not everybody has access to your home, right? Not everybody gets to sleep in your house. Not everybody gets to drive your car. Not everybody gets to have access to you. And that's where strategic sharing comes in. Ask yourself, truly, has this person even earned access to this part of me? Have they shown that they can hold the responsibility to what I've shown them of me? Because oversharing in unsafe spaces can lead to deeper wounds. So, as I go through this, here's where it's the hard part. And that is, when do you fight for a space, a relationship, a friendship, any relationship in your life? When do you fight for a space, and when do you walk away? You're fighting for a space. You fight for a space, truly, when there's mutual effort, when both people are fighting together or working together to make sure the space is okay. When there's accountability for wrongdoing, and then there's growth that's actually happening there. But where you leave is when you're constantly shrinking yourself to appease and to maintain the space just so your emotions can be okay. When your voice is dismissed, you're not being heard, when you're invisible, when your well-being is declining, and when your mental health cannot be talked about. And even when expressed, that too is treated as silence. Not every space is meant to be saved. Not every space is meant to be saved. Some spaces are meant to be outgrown. This is part of the episode I want you to carry with you. Not every space is worth fighting for. And one of the most important skills you can develop is knowing the difference between a space that needs work and a space that is working you. When is it worth fighting for? You fight for a space when there is a genuine care present, even if communication is broken. It's a space you fight for when the people in it are willing to grow. Your voice is when your voice has a real chance of being heard. It is when you have something to protect, that being your own family, that being your child, your community, your own healing. But when it's time to leave, you leave or create distance when your presence is constantly used against you, is when your growth is punished instead of celebrated. When you leave, every interaction feeling smaller than when you came in, is where your boundaries are treated as problems to be solved rather than your boundaries being respected. So, how to create your own space, essentially, or how to navigate when you leave that unhealthy space. This is what I want you to leave you with. Because sometimes you don't find the space you need. Sometimes you have to build it. And building a space means, oftentimes enough, getting intentional about who has access to your emotional energy. Creating habits that protect and restore you. Quiet time, journaling, therapy, prayer, whatever can ground you. Is when you finding community with people who reflect the kind of person that you're actively becoming, not just the person you've been. It is also naming what you need and giving yourself permission to go directly after it unapologetically. And a word to foster youth. I want to speak directly to any young person in the system who has been through the system, such as myself. Your need for a safe space is real, valid, and urgent. The instability of foster care can make it feel like there's no place that's truly yours. But I want you to know that space can be built. It can be a mentor. It can be a therapist, a program, a community, a version of yourself that you choose to become. You deserve a space that holds you. So, as I end this episode, we go over the impact of spaces, right? Healthy spaces promote growth, supporting healing, build confidence. Unhealthy spaces create anxiety, reinforce trauma, limit your potential. So the question becomes, what kind of space are you choosing? And what kind of space are you creating? So, closing today's episode, I asked the question, can we talk? Not just today, but moving forward. Because this isn't just about having conversations. This is about how we show up for each other and how you show up for yourself. So I leave you with this. Be intentional about your spaces. Be honest in your conversations. And be accountable for the energy and perspective and space that you bring. Because healthy spaces don't just exist. They are built. And I know I'm having that Irish goodbye, but before I let you go, I want to leave you with one affirmation. Well, one challenge. I'm calling it your space, your voice. Pick one space in your life, one relationship, one environment, one conversation that's been sitting in the back of your mind, and make one move. And it does not have to be huge. Maybe send a text that says, "Hey, can we talk?" Maybe you make an appointment for therapy. Maybe you sit down and journal about what you need without judgment. Maybe you sit in silence for maybe 5 minutes and allow your thoughts to just go. And maybe you step back from something that's been taking more than it gives. One move. That's all. And your affirmation for the week: I deserve spaces that hold me, conversations that change me, that challenge me, and relationships that see me, and I have the power to build them. So, with that being said, if this episode spoke to you, I want you to do three things. Share this with someone you trust, reflect on one space in your life that needs change, and start a real conversation this week. This is Outreach with Reggie. I'm your host, Reggie Holloway, where we don't just talk about problems, we talk about solutions. Until next time, take care. I love you.